alongside Canada and the United States, to follow the lead of countries like Ireland, Norway, and Spain, and around 75% of the rest of the world, and immediately recognize the state of Palestine without conditions, in the same way they rightly recognize the state of Israel. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction, but thank you also for your organization. Can I thank you and colleagues at the ICD, colleagues at the Academy for Cultural Diplomacy, and for all of the partners who have put together this wonderful gathering. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for making sure that the sun was shining for us during this gathering as well. I've had a great day here over the last 24 hours, meeting so many of you and learning already in the space of actually less than 24 hours so much from you. And many of you have taken the time to tell me about your Scottish connections, because you will notice there is a Scottish delegation, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, but also former First Minister Lord Jack McConnell. So many of you have come to me to tell me your own connection and ancestry and history of Scotland that you have. Massimo was telling me his son studied in Edinburgh University. A number of friends were telling me they worked in Scotland or they had some sort of connection with our country, which makes us very proud. Indeed, it reminds me of the saying that there are two types of people in the world, Scots and those who want to be Scottish. So whichever one you are most welcome. There's also a third type of person, that person that has no ambition whatsoever. But in all seriousness, I am very pleased to be here. I can think of no more pressing time than for politicians and diplomats, thinkers, NGOs, and all of those who are interested in peace to gather together in the name of peace. Those of us who enjoy peace, of course, take it so often for granted. This is the month of Ramadan, as many of you know. Many Muslims across the world observing the holy month of Ramadan. It's a month that I've practiced all of my adult life. And I always find in Ramadan the first few days are always the most difficult. And on the very first day of Ramadan, I was grumbling and moaning to my dear wife at around about 3 p.m. in the afternoon that I was beginning to feel hungry and thirsty. And my wife, in all of her wisdom, of course, was right to remind me that in only 3 hours' time, I could turn on the tap and drink as much water as my heart or stomach desired. And she reminded me that whatever food I wanted, chicken shawarma, steak, lobster, whatever I wanted, I would have and could have on the plate in 3 hours' time. I chose the shawarma, by the way, just in case you're wondering. And, of course, forget my excesses. If I think about too many people in the world, like those in Gaza, Sudan, DRC, and so many other countries in the world, access to the basics, food, clean water, medicine, shelter, is but a distant dream, particularly those countries ravaged by conflict. And ladies and gentlemen, as the ancient Chinese curse goes, we certainly live in interesting times. Many people have commented already that we live in a new world order. I would gently suggest that it is a new world disorder. From a Scottish and UK perspective particularly, one of our closest allies, the United States, who fought on our side with us in the trenches of World War II, was just last week in the UN on the side of dictators in Russia, North Korea, and Belarus. In a remarkable set of social media posts, we witnessed a complete reversal of reality, where the elected politician and victim of a Russian invasion against his people was labelled as a dictator and an aggressor by none other than the president of the so-called free world. And of course, to amplify his message was the world's wealthiest man, Elon Musk, whose own social media platform has over 650 million users, double the population of the United States. We live in that world, in the reality where a man, Volodymyr Zelensky, has lost countless thousands of men and women to a war that neither he started nor wanted. But he's very publicly berated in the Oval Office in front of the world's media for not being thankful enough for the support he is receiving when he's fighting not just for his country's freedom, but for the freedom of many countries. We live in a world that is so volatile that the transatlantic alliance that has taken 80 years of hard work, energy, diplomatic effort to create and cement was on the verge of absolute collapse because of a single social media post. And we are living at a time when people's homes, their land, their dignity is seen as nothing more than a real estate deal waiting to be done. All complete with lurid AI videos showing the allure of Trump Riviera, complete with golden statues of the dear leader, and for some bizarre and inexplicable reason, belly dancing bearded men, apparently. So it's a world that is riddled with conflict, and while men in suits and balaclavas wage war, we know that it is innocent people, women and children in particular, who suffer the most. It is apt then that we are gathering here in Berlin, discussing the fantastic Berlin initiative. My thanks once again to Yossi and Hiba for their initiation of this important gathering. But it is apt that we're gathering here in Berlin, a city that still has the bullet holes from the carnage of World War II in some of its most prominent buildings, such as the National Museum of Villa Paris. And of course, it's home to the striking and powerful foundation memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, a memorial that I was honoured to visit just this morning. They all act as a visual reminder of the failure of diplomacy and the anarchy that can ensue when impunity reigns free. I will come to where I think the solution lies in just a moment, but it is perhaps worth me just underlining just how desperately our world needs peace, how desperately it needs you as peacemakers, as if, of course, anybody was in any doubt, of course. Our world that is consumed with conflict, where approximately a quarter of the world's entire population, 2 billion people, live in a war-torn country. By mid-2024, more than 120 million individuals were forcibly displaced. This marks the 12th consecutive year of rising displacement figures and represents a nearly 50% increase in internally displaced people over the last 5 years, primarily due to conflict. In 2025, it's estimated that 305 million people will be requiring humanitarian assistance, with crisis, as we know, in Gaza, Ukraine, the DRC, Sudan, contributing significantly to this demand. And at a time when some of the biggest contributors to financial aid to those important NGOs doing that work on food security are seeing their budgets slashed. The Armed Conflict Survey estimates that over 200,000 people have been killed as a result of conflict in 2024, with millions injured, impoverished, and living in famine. So it's impossible to say that the situation is anything other than extremely bleak indeed. But I hope, like many people here, I have never been a fatalist. When the late and great Desmond Tutu lauded the successes of post-apartheid South Africa, a South African journalist accused him of being an eternal optimist, to which he replied, "No, my dear, I'm not an eternal optimist. I am merely a prisoner of hope." And it's a sentiment that I too share, because we know that it is in the darkest of times that we see the best of the human condition shine brightly. The conflict, war, and violence that we see in far too many parts of the world is a symptom and a consequence of the failure of international diplomacy, but also, in truth, of our multilateral institutions. And perversely, therein, of course, lies our only solution. Our only way, even through the most intractable challenges and obstacles, must be through diplomacy, through negotiations, through meaningful peace processes. And that is why I applaud the Berlin Initiative for putting forward, and the HLC, the Holy Land Confederation, for putting forward ideas on what peace might look like. Before even getting to that stage, we require honest brokers, be they nation states, multilateral institutions, or NGOs. Those who are suffering the consequences of war, they need to believe that we view their lives as valuable as our own. And I'm afraid the truth is that for so many in Asia, Africa, across the Middle East, and with some justification, they simply do not believe that their lives are viewed as equal by the international community compared to European and Western lives. The atrocities in Gaza are evidence of this. No reasonable person can or should say anything other than the attacks on the 7th of October 2023 were horrific. There can be no justification for the kidnapping of innocent civilians, especially children. And I was not the only one, of course, who was heartbroken at the sights of the coffins of Kifr and Ariel Bibas. They say it is the smallest coffins that are the heaviest. And just as nothing can justify October the 7th, nothing can then justify the horrific, disproportionate retaliation from Israel that has to date killed thousands of children in Gaza. And the names of 5-year-old Hind Rajab, of 4-day-old twins Asil and Asar al-Kumasan, and the 18,000 other children killed in Gaza should be and must be remembered alongside Kifr and Ariel Bibas. And herein lies our first challenge, to ensure that our moral compass is not simply aligned to one group of people, one ethnicity, one religious group, or one nationality. Our compassion must be universal, not conditional. And so should our application of international law. In Scotland and across the United Kingdom, and of course in many other countries across the world, we generously opened our homes to Ukrainian refugees, a move that I very warmly welcome and was very proud of. It's the mark of an empathetic nation that we open our borders, we open our homes to provide sanctuary for those who are in most need. However, it seems that the UK government's generosity and the generosity and empathy of many governments across the world does not extend to those from Gaza or Sudan, with no refugee schemes for those suffering the horrors of war in those lands. When it is Europeans who suffer, then we are willing to be our brother's keeper. But when, or if you are the wrong colour, the wrong religion, the wrong culture, then I'm sorry, there's no room in the inn. And those who are suffering the consequences of war or occupation, they've of course been failed by individual nation states. They look to the international community to have their basic rights upheld. And I'm afraid there's far too many people, again with justification, who do not believe that international law is worth much more than the paper it is written on. And I'm a great believer in the importance of international law to maintain the global rules-based order. In fact, it is crucial. But in my view, we are at the most crucial juncture for international law post-war. The solution to the multiple crises and conflicts we face must be rooted in the equal, and I emphasize that word again, in the equal application of international law. If it is seen to apply to only one group of people and not another, then we have no accountability, but simply impunity. And that is why I welcome arrest warrants from the ICC for both senior Hamas officials, but also for Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. it shows a system that doesn't discriminate in its application of international law. And some say, but there can be no moral equivalence between the two. They are missing the point entirely, that there must be moral equivalence in the value of the life of a child, be they Israeli or Palestinian. And the test therein for each nation, particularly those who are signatories to the Rome Statute, will be how seriously they enforce their legal obligations. Or will they, as Germany may well seek to do under the man who is likely to be the next Chancellor of this country, will they find ways of abdicating their legal responsibility when it is an ally who is the subject of an arrest warrant? Such discriminatory application of the law only threatens to undermine it entirely. So friends, I've spoken of the importance of international legal framework and how vital, effective multilateral institutions must be to fostering peace. Clearly, the third and crucial element for any peace process is for the parties of the conflict to be willing to engage in dialogue. And for that also a meaningful process is required. And that's why I once again express my gratitude to Dr. Berlin, Dr. Husseini, and all of those who are involved in putting the Berlin Initiative together and for gathering us here for the next few days. I promise you I do admire a lot more people than Desmond Tutu, but if I may quote him once again, he is of course famed with saying, "If you want peace, don't talk to your friends, but your enemies." Now I'm certain nobody gathered here are enemies, but let us not underplay the hurt and the pain that many Israelis and Palestinians have suffered over the years, and many continue to suffer to this very day. No one here is naive. I think of the decades of experience in conflict resolution in this room alone. Nobody is naive to the complexity and the seemingly intractable situation between Israel and Palestine. No one believes that we're going to solve all of that in the next couple of days. However, a gathering of moderates, Palestinians, Israelis, who are ready to sit around the table, acknowledging their differences, but prepared to engage in a pathway towards an end to the conflict, is the only way that peace will be achieved. And I applaud those individuals because of the hatred that they get from their own side, from their own communities, from their own peoples. And I quoted yesterday Abraham Lincoln, who said, of course, to achieve peace, you have to avoid popularity, or words to that effect. And of course, some people have felt that, including Abraham Lincoln, at great cost, of course. So everything we do must be rooted in international law, human rights, and equality. A two-state solution with an independent, fully functioning Palestinian state, which must of course include Gaza and the West Bank, unified under a functioning Palestinian Authority, sitting alongside a safe, secure Israel, is the only plausible solution in my view. And that can only happen when the international community recognizes a Palestinian state as it should. I do not believe those nations and countries who say that they believe in a two-state solution, but of course only recognize one side of the equation. They are merely paying lip service to a two-state solution. So I would urge European nations like the United Kingdom, like Germany, like France, alongside Canada and the United States, to follow the lead of countries like Ireland, Norway, and Spain, and around 75% of the rest of the world, and immediately recognize the state of Palestine, without conditions, in the same way they rightly recognize the state of Israel. And at the heart of any peace, as I have said, must be equality. Equality of life, equality of rights, equality of dignity. And for me, I just cannot think of a more noble endeavor than the pursuit of peace. And in that, I'm reminded of the words of St. Francis of Assisi, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon." Who would have thought a Muslim gathered with friends from the Jewish community reciting a Christian prayer? Perhaps, though, it's a reminder of the commonality between us. And perhaps with all of the complexities of geopolitics and history of that particular region, we forget the most basic tenets upon which peace should be built. The equality in life and liberty, that all men, all women, all boys, all girls, they are born equal. And whoever they are, whatever land they are born in, whatever religion they choose to practice, whatever their pigmentation of skin, that their life is of equal worth to anybody else. So ladies and gentlemen, I do look forward, as I have already done, to listening to the excellent contributions of those gathered here today. I think this Berlin Initiative, I think the Holy Land Confederation are both extremely worthwhile initiatives. But perhaps more than that, the fact that Yossi and Hiba and their partners have gathered people from different political traditions, from different countries across the world, in the pursuit of peace. Well, there can be no more noble an endeavour. And I look forward to being on this pathway of peace with you, not just in the coming days, but in the coming months, the coming years, and if it requires it, the coming decades ahead. Thank you very much.